Love you, Linda. Love you.
The courthouse the other day in the hallway, you're singing "Oh Happy Day."
One word prayer. Justice, where are you?
And welcome to Justice Served TV. I'm Michael Bryant. And there's Linda Kenney Baden. How are you?
Well, it's been a busy morning, hasn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
Couldn't even get ready, really. Besides, I'm getting a haircut tomorrow. So I got these wings coming out here. I got wings coming out the back. I got it's been months.
You have no troubles. You have no troubles.
Months.
By the way, I have scheduled a rant for 4 p.m. this afternoon, which should take everyone through 6. I'll be reposting it. Just so you know, and it's a rant that you're all going to love. It's about Sandra Birchmore and some assholery who attacked me on my, sent me an email attacking me for my ethics and my husband for allegedly being bought by boatloads of money. All right, so you're going to find this rant very interesting, all of you. We're going to spread the word, but first we have 2 other things to talk about. One is Diddy, and of course, and we have Kohberger.
Yeah, timing could not be much more complicated, but yeah. So this morning, our predictions regarding Sean P. Diddy Combs came true, which of course is that the only charge to which he really was likely to be convicted were the Mann Act violations, and that is in fact what has happened. People are freaking out there. Well, are they freaking off or freaking out? I mean, you know, they look past what was needed to get to a guilty verdict because they're just shocked at the behavior. Right. So I'm announcing today, I already did this on X, but I'm announcing today a new axiom to go along with my many others, including never underestimate the power of likability. The new one is, so make sure I get this correct here. Everybody has the right to make bad choices. Okay. That is your God-given right, protected by the Constitution as well. And that's what we have here. Adults making bad choices. If there were kids involved, it's a whole different conversation.
Right. And that's what I thought initially. And some reporter talked to me this morning, and I said, "Look, when he was arrested, there was Homeland Security. They were taking planes in this country. They were getting his kids over here. They were doing this at this house. We thought this was a whole sex ring of trafficking kids for drugs. I mean, that's what I thought. And it turned out that it was mostly about freak-off parties. And I'm sure the jury was not happy sitting there having to watch all that stuff."
Yeah,
for a RICO case. A RICO case. I mean,
yeah.
This is not just a regular charge of something. This is a RICO case, everyone.
Yeah. RICO 0 for 3 in creative attempts to use it in very unusual circumstances.
Right.
Obviously, YSL probably the biggest up until now, the biggest example of a failed attempt to use RICO for something other than its originally intended purpose, right? So let me pull this up just so it looks like we're actually on top of things. I realize I'm not a dummy. Everybody on the planet is doing something right now about this case, about Kohberger coming up. You know, it ain't us. We're doing our thing, and we're happy to be here and doing it. But you know, I'm not deluded into thinking we're bringing you some exclusive, amazing stuff, except for our insights, of course, which are exclusive and amazing.
Right, and the judge did say that he's going to decide whether or not to let Diddy out at 1, and I think at 1 p.m. And I think he's going to have an ankle brace at home monitoring. He's served a lot of time already.
If you think about it,
basically, just to let me tell you, this is 2 Mann Act violations. This is transporting somebody interstate that it was 2 people, Cassie and Jane, for sex, for money, for prostitution. Okay. That's where you're at. That's the case. That's what the jury spent all this time and all this money, and the Fed spent all this money to convict on.
Yep, that's it. And that's a live picture, by the way, outside the courthouse. Yeah, I think there's going to be some negotiating because technically, first of all, he's been in since September, which is amazingly fast because it's federal court, right? You know, this could be the YSL case where you're in for 2.5, 3 years,
right,
and then acquitted, right?
People don't realize that the federal trials run very quickly once you get charged.
So he's, right. I mean, he's acquitted now on the charges that would have kept him in prison if he had just been brought in jail. If he'd been brought up on charges of Mann Act and only the Mann Act, he would not be in custody. That would be highly unlikely. They could try. Of course, they could try because if you think about it, the Mann Act is transporting people across state lines for an illegal purpose. Well, it kind of has built into it flight risk, right? Because you have the ability to travel all over the place. But unlikely that he would have been in custody since September. That's just a fact. So if you're acquitted on all the other things, you should be walking out the door today. And if they have to do it because they have to suck it up a little bit on the side of the defense, Brian Steele and the rest of the gang, and say, okay, put an ankle monitor on him, or okay, restrict his travel to only domestic. And this, remember, only stays in place till sentencing, right?
Right.
This is just to keep him in place till sentencing. They'll have sentencing reports made. They'll have recommendations. I wanted to look more into this because when I predicted yesterday that these, in fact, would be the only charges he'd be convicted of, I knew at the time that there had to be federal guidelines. Interestingly, there really are not, unless a minor is involved in the Mann Act violation. Okay, so this relates to those that are not minors, in other words, adults, and there are no real guidelines for the federal court. They have broad discretion in what they do. So that could mean no jail time. That could mean totally probation. The only time they have to impose a mandatory minimum is if a minor is involved.
Right.
So,
right, which is not the case here.
No.
Yeah. And I had said yesterday to you, and I think I said it more privately, but living in New York City and talking to people in New York City, I find that there was a certain feeling about people in New York City that when I would say, and Diddy, they would say, oh, I mean, I don't think they should be convicted at all. I don't think they should be convicted at all. So what? So what? These are people engaged in sex. They really, the feeling I got is, hey, if they were charging him for that assault on Cassie, that was horrible. He should go to prison for that. But he wasn't being charged with that assault, right?
It was beyond the statute, so they missed out on that.
Yeah.
She did sue the hotel, and she got $10 million from the hotel. In some form of justice, I suppose, in that. Here's a good question. Jessica says, will Diddy be classed as a sex offender? Yes, he will have to register as a sex offender. Let me read, just to clarify what I just mentioned about how much time he will or will not be sentenced to. Offenders convicted of Mann Act violations or sex trafficking, this is under an overall kind of umbrella approach, must be sentenced to a term of supervised release for any term of years not less than 5. So that means that the easiest he gets is 5 years probation, supervised probation. That's the bottom end of the mandatory guideline. So it's not incarceration. What this judge does, he's asked for the parties to come back at 1 o'clock, each with a letter. Here, judge, here's my letter. Here's what I think should happen. I have a feeling it might be more electronic than that, but nonetheless, they're looking for arguments as to why he should get little to no time, probation, or whether he's up for 20 years max. 2 times 10. I'm no math major, but I'm pretty sure that's 20. So conceivably, that's on the table, but don't kid yourself. There's not a chance in hell that is happening. That would be so inappropriate, so easily appealed. I don't think anybody's even chewing on that as a possibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there was also, they had this expectation. But as I was saying, people would say to me, hey, look, one person, and these are mostly women I talked to, because women were the ones who were affected, who saw the beating on Cassie. And they were like, hey, look, you give me 10 years of being at the front row of the Knicks games and traveling in a private jet and all.
Hold on, let me interrupt for just a second. Here come some of Diddy's family and friends and supporters coming back for that 1 o'clock.
I mean, I make a bad choice, but in the meantime, I had fun. That's what, and I heard this over and over again, and I thought to myself, sometimes we need to step out and talk to people, because we look at it as was there a violation, right? Was there a violation? And that's not how the jury was looking. The jury was looking at it common sense wise. Obviously, they had the same discussions that the people on the street had with me about Diddy. And I said, sure, is he freaky and freak offs, and
is he a likable guy? Did he have some aberrant behavior under most people's standards? Yeah. Is that a crime?
No.
Is it disgusting?
No,
is
not
it distasteful?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Is it a crime? No. And I still have issues with the Mann Act being used in this case, because you don't have a true victim. So how you can look at that? It's a double standard. It's suggesting that sex workers are violating crimes.
Right. That's what I don't like.
Okay, let me get rid of that before I before
Gear it up.
There he
Thank
is.
you for the color. Yes, it's a Dolce shirt, very Italian. You wear it during Lent and Good Friday and all this deep purple the priests wear. As you know, I'm Catholic, so I thought it would be appropriate today for Kohberger. In any event, to me, the jury had some very, very straight discussions in there, in terms of what they felt and what they believed, and maybe they didn't like seeing all these what they would consider, I imagine, pornographic films of people having sex. I mean, like a little over the top government. And Brian Steele, boy, woo, brought in.
He's on a roll. He's on a roll.
He's on a roll. Brought
And he
in to
wasn't the
cross-examine.
primary. He wasn't the chief.
No, it was Mark Anafilio. It was, and then there was Garagos, and they brought Brian Steele in. But Brian Steele did a lot of the heavy lifting questions.
I'm sure he did. Micah, what are the guidelines when sentencing on multiple counts? Yeah, well, kind of really no different than what I just mentioned. You're just applying it to twofold. Could they be stacked? Could they be concurrent versus consecutive? Yeah, technically. I think it's going to be looked at as more holistic than that. Here's the overall. It may have to be broken down for the court's administrative purposes. On this count, you get this. On this count, you get this. But it's really, I think, going to be looked at more holistically. And maybe it's going to be 7
I think we'll
years
get an
probation.
idea. Yeah, I think we're going to get an idea. If Judge Subramanian lets him out, right?
Which I guarantee, I'll bet that right now. He's out.
If he lets him out on ankle bracelet, house arrest, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards, no contact with this, no contact with that, and a high bail, with regard to...
it's $1 million bail. They've already, written that check.
That indeed you're going to see the likelihood that therefore he's not going back to jail if he lets him out now. So that'll tell us. And he may not decide at 1 o'clock. He may have them come back at 1 o'clock, wants the arguments, and then he may decide. I mean, it's either later today or tomorrow or whenever.
And today's ultimate question is he to be held pending sentencing?
Sentence, right. Not with the sentence.
Not an imposition of a sentence. This is just what do we do with him before sentencing?
And he may also hold them. He may also hold them pending sentencing because that gives him more time, and then he can say, "I'm giving you time served," right?
Yeah, I just can't think of one reason to justify keeping him in jail a day longer. I just can't.
I agree with you, Don Walworth. Thank you. Gauls, we posted this, but let me say it, that it's a member for 3 months. Thank you very much. And of course, you gifted one justice cert.
Thank you, Donnie Walberg.
Yeah, and Micah, we answered this. I hope with your question, Micah, who has one of our original mugs. We have to get back to that. We haven't. We've been so busy. We haven't been where the world is justice.
I know. I thought about
person of the week and all that, right?
Yeah, we've really fallen down on the job. I really thought I had half regret not going down there today for Diddy, and then here was my thought process as I see it start to develop in the wildness after having just gone through the Karen Reed situation and taking some small measure of pride in the fact that we had an actual crowd out there. Based on the lawsuits filed.
Based on one of and you're one of them. You're one of them.
That's what I'm saying. In the moment I didn't give it much thought, but in retrospect, when I see all the video, and I have just a dose, just a skosh of pride about being involved in that. This is such a different environment, different atmosphere. I think more negative. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the proper word, but the Reed contingent was positive about what they hoped was the outcome for her. This, I think it's more mad at the prosecution. I don't know. It's just a. I wasn't sure I was ready to inject myself into that yet again.
By the way, he's. This is. They should be. We should look to see whether or not Inner City Press is reporting from inside the courtroom. And yes, this is going to be covering Kohberger. Kohberger is going to be from the judge's camera inside the court.
Yes, and do we have that feed, right? Or we're waiting on it, or nothing's happening? I know I sent it to Missy yesterday. I've been on the press list for everything that comes up in that case, so they sent the feed link yesterday. I'm not seeing Missy, so I don't know if we have it or not. I don't know. We should have it, and that's one thing I won't miss. There it is.
Yeah,
beautiful. I love that. One thing I won't miss is the specter of that ugly Zoom-esque 3-camera wide angle inside the courtroom shot that we would have been seeing in the Kohberger case for the duration. It's a minor thing. I get it. There are many people that are very upset that he is not going to be tried, even though he is officially going to be convicted and never see the light of day. And I don't mean the family members. A lot of people are so invested in this case. Like, dude, it's not your life. Maybe you're covering
I'm
it.
just telling you, yes, there are. I tell you, I walk down the street or I sit in New York or I have a cup of coffee. People talk about it. We were thinking Karen Reed, but in New York City, this case is huge. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And maybe obviously elsewhere too.
Well, it's an interesting day. People have been, their travels have been split. I know that I saw Donna Rotuno. Remember her? I interviewed her after. Oh gosh, which case was it that she won? And she had an amazing closing argument. But we were covering it on Law and Crime, and I got to do the interview with her after. She's a great defense attorney. She's got all of the tools, right? She's got the narrative, she's got the mannerisms, she's got the comfort level, and so she's been an expert on one of the networks, which. They need experts, believe me, because some of the rank and file are so off on what's happening in these cases. Anyway, she's amazing, and she did that, but she was reporting on Diddy from Kohberger. So doing a little double duty there. And so let me just rag on some of these networks just briefly here. I can't give you the name of the network, but the initials are FOX. So I'm listening, and one of their experts, actually this was like rank and file, said that. And I've seen this reporter before. I was
not the reporter I'm dealing with. The reporter I was talking to this morning, he's great. Yes,
no. I'm not indicting all folks. I'm just thinking of a particular two people. And this particular person is the reporter that is always outside the courthouse. And she reported that Diddy had to be found guilty of 5 predicate acts for the RICO to kick in. And I mean, it's such a fundamental mistake. It's really inexcusable. Obviously, it's not
too predicate. It's too right.
Irrelevant. Didn't happen in the first place.
If you didn't learn that from YSL, and if you look at the verdict form, which I had here, and I do have here, and right now it's probably in front of me, but I think you have it right there, right?
What are you looking for?
The verdict form.
I did have it. Did you want to see it again?
I wanted to see it. I wanted to see page 2 of the verdict form.
Okay, let me see if I can audibilize here and pull that up for you. And it is, remember, page 2 goes down to the end of count 3, right?
Right.
And is that going to help you? Let me see if I can pull that up.
No, it's actually the bottom of the RICO on page 2.
That is on there as well. So let me see if I can present that for you. Stand by, please. Okay, here we go.
You'll get it in a second. I know you'll get that.
Yeah, I got it. I got to fight my computer. Come on.
I did that this morning. I had my first. I was pulling things in as you have taught me, and it's very difficult.
Don't blame me.
No, I did. You taught me well, but it's difficult when you're looking for things very quickly. And then it takes, it's not that instantaneous thing when you have a control room that's able to instantaneously.
Yes, that is very different. There we go.
Right. So I'm going to the questions if you see them.
This only shows the last 3 of the total possible acts.
Right. So this is on the RICO, and the reason why I'm pointing this out because it says if and only if you find the defendant guilty of count 1. The pattern of racketeering did it include sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, and then the second one would be the sex trafficking of Jane. So it was really interesting to me because if they had found sex trafficking, then those two they would have found
the RICO would have kicked in. Yeah,
the RICO would have kicked in
because basically the guilty on 3 and 5 are one each of the predicates. They're halfway there.
Right. So it seemed to me that when they were hung on the RICO, they really, they may not have been hung on this whole thing. Or, this may have been a jury who said, overall, let's look at this. Or, let's look at this. Okay, they couldn't find RICO. They were hung, and then they went down to look at the individual counts. And so they didn't find then sex trafficking counts. It's interesting because they said they had a verdict. Here's what's interesting. They said they had a verdict on 2, 3, 4, and 5. Remember? So 2 and 4 are sex trafficking. So as a result of having that verdict on sex trafficking, which had to be not guilty because it was today, they couldn't have found the sex trafficking on that's under the RICO count. That had to be no. So if you look at it in reverse, looking back at the form, and those are the 2 things we picked out yesterday to say, hey, wait a second.
And we
you know?
also were thinking this. I thought maybe one. Turns out it was maybe two. We'll get more detail when the jurors actually speak. But somebody, and maybe it was the person not willing to follow the court's instructions, but there were one or two folks who apparently were not leaning toward acquittal for RICO. Now, it was reported that it was the opposite. That it was. We heard it was 10-2 in favor
Oh, that's what
of
people
guilt.
are saying.
No
Some of the
way. There's
mainstream
no
media
way.
wasn't covering this. The mainstream media, you know, what happens is the law tubers are covering this. Yeah, Lauren Conlon was on our show. She was in the courtroom every single day.
And Terry
While
Austin, she was
Terry
also
Austin was in Inner City
on.
Press in the courtroom every single day. And it's really interesting. Well, Lauren has said that she had PTSD listening to all the stuff with the freak-off parties, but that wasn't the crime. The parties and how disgusting they may have been, you know, maybe to other people they're not, you know.
You're right. Obviously, to some they're not because they're happening.
Right. Yeah. So anyhow, it'd be interesting to see. Let me take a look at Inner City Press because hold on a second.
I sent Terry a note today
and
telling her to hang in there, and I said, I think today's the day.
That you did, and you were right.
Yeah.
There will be Inner City Press said. All he said is something that I retweeted. There'll be a bail hearing in one way or another, and a sentencing down the road, and maybe an appeal of the Mann Act convictions. I really think that there may be a constitutionality appeal here of the Mann Act convictions at this point. Yeah. That if you go back to the reason why it was supposed to be, which is the traffic, interstate transport of minors, right? For an illegal.
That's not in the statute. It's an enhancement, as I mentioned with the punishment. If the minor's involved, then there are major mandatories. But yeah, so I think it's a philosophical discussion
about whether sex workers, you know, and not that
an illegal activity,
right? Not that, and I think they found that it wasn't for the sex workers because they only found the Mann Act regarding Cassie and Jane. Now that brings up a really interesting question because if you're in a relationship and you're, as people would say, you're being bought, right? Is it coercive control, which obviously the jurors did come down and find for, or were some arguing that maybe it was like, well, that's what you do in relationships. People, you know, give people things.
That's what I'm saying. It's a philosophical discussion that is very difficult to legislate. I can't imagine how they do that unless they make the Mann Act applicable only to non-adults, only to minors.
Only to minors, right.
Who are really the original intended protected class.
Yeah, and I wonder whether when we get to the courts as they've been reshaped now, whether that's really an issue that will be taken up on a higher level because it's such an old statute. It's a really old statute, right? The Mann Act was when was it started? Do you remember?
Now you're testing me. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, let's say
It's MANN for folks who don't remember me saying that many times. Yeah, and that's just the name of the primary litigant, not a gender thing.
Right. The Mann Act. So I you know, so the question the judge has to decide today is he going to give him bail pending his sentencing? That's really the issue. And in federal court, sentencings are usually a long way off. Okay, I've had sentencing 7 or 8 months after you've come in and you've taken a plea, you know, sure. And people get to go along. And you even saw the senator in New Jersey who was convicted in New York, right? Whose name escapes me. One would think I could remember that recently.
Bob. Robert.
Menendez.
Menendez, and his wife is still to be tried. Yeah,
right. His wife is still to be tried. But if you looked at them, he was convicted, and then there were months. It's not like state courts where you get your you go right away. You get your things in order. Okay, Justice Serve TV, the Mann Act, also known as the White Slave Traffic Act, prohibits the transportation of individuals across state lines for immoral purposes.
1910, by the way.
1910.
June 25, 1910.
So it's really old. I mean, it's
named after Congressman James Mann.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So, and it had a very different purpose 115 years ago.
Right.
Okay, looks like Kohberger is going to do something.
Thank you, Christine Mitchell, for that donation. We love all of our people, too. Okay, so Kohberger, let's go in. That's why we're here. Look at that view. Look at the view there. It's hard to see him.
It's brutal.
This far away. I mean, you don't get that up close and personal as you do. And maybe that's what the judge wants. There he is. You see Bryan Kohberger. He's seated between his lead lawyer and another death penalty lawyer. He looks like he's had a haircut. He's in a shirt. he looks a lot less menacing from this angle than he does when you see him.
CR
Hey, here we go.
012431665. Defendant is present in custody with counsel, Ms. Thompson, Ms. Jennings, and pardon me, Ms. Taylor, Ms. Massoff, and Ms. Barlow. The state's present with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Horowitz, Ms. Jennings, and Mr. Nye is here as well. Am I miss anybody? I'm sorry.
Ms. Allen is here as well.
Ms.
Your
Allen
Honor.
is here as well. Very well, thank you. All right, we are here today to entertain a change of plea. Before I start, I want to address some issues of concern and otherwise. First, I appreciate everybody in attendance today being on their best behavior. Please, no outbursts or demonstrations. Any such conduct will result in immediate removal and may result in an inability to attend further court proceedings. I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases where defendants are entitled to have their cases processed and frankly, as important, if not more so, for victims to have their cases processed in those cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me, period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement.
Ooh.
I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this because, again, it is not appropriate and frankly not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this. I also want people to understand some very basic concepts about the ideas of separation of powers, what the court's duties are, and what the duties and the rights of the executive, or in this case, the prosecuting attorney, is. The executive, the elected prosecutor, is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, including whether, as well as what penalties to ask for, and what penalties to pursue, including the death penalty. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance. I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea. Finally, I want to offer my apologies to all the families, including the victims' families, the families of the defendant, for the short notice for today's hearing, and I'm sure what must have been the hurried efforts to get here. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand. Prior to that time, I was under the belief that this case was proceeding to trial, as had been indicated, and my staff and I were busy continuing to work on preparations to have potentially 10,000 citizens of Ada County come to jury duty starting in mid-July with the questionnaire process in mid-July. It was, once I learned of the defendant's decision to change his plea in this case, it was important that I take the plea as soon as possible because of the extraordinary administrative efforts that were otherwise attendant to the process of this, getting this trial potentially underway on time, and including the significant process of bringing, again, potentially up to 10,000 jurors to come in and fill out juror questionnaires prior to the beginning of the voir dire process. And so it was important that we, if we're going to go down this road, do so expeditiously so that we can avoid those costs and expenses associated with that. Otherwise, if it was not going to result in a plea, or if for some reason the plea were to fall through today, that we could continue diligently towards trial at the time specified. And so that obviously required that we act quickly. And so some folks may have not had the amount of time that we would otherwise allow for them to travel here. And so, again, I apologize for that. I want to make people aware that during the hearing, if you are to leave the courtroom for any reason, you will not be readmitted during the hearing. Also, when we finish the hearing this morning, I ask that the public and media wait in their seats until the victims' families and the defendants' families and others are escorted out of the courtroom before you start to leave. Finally, I want to acknowledge the trial court administrator and her staff, the Ada County Sheriff, and the Ada County 4th District Marshal Service for the huge lift that they've accomplished in preparing for and orchestrating this hearing today, as well as to all the security attendant today that you see, and some of whom you, many of whom you don't see, with less than 48 hours notice. And so I appreciate the hard work that they've been doing. Frankly, some of them while they were on some vacation prior to the trial starting and had to call that short. And so I appreciate very much their professionalism and dedication. All right. That said, let's move to the business of today. I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates in sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing, to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35. This is not a Rule 11 agreement, meaning the court is not bound by the plea agreement and could impose a different lawful sentence at sentencing The stipulated agreement between the parties is the maximum on each count. So theoretically, the only thing the court could do would be a lesser sentence at sentencing. But the defendant is not free to ask the court to do so under the plea agreement. Are there any other material terms of the plea agreement that the parties would like to make? Obviously, the plea agreement, the written plea agreement will speak for itself, will be part of the court record.
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very well. All right. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this case and all of its ramifications with your client?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you discussed fully with him his rights, defenses, and possible consequences to him of the guilty plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you been able to do all the discovery you feel necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you informed your client of the importance of providing the court truthful and accurate answers in taking this plea today?
I have.
Have you apprised your client of any and all offers and counter offers and answered his questions about those?
Yes,
Do you consent to the entry of the plea today?
I do.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now while you're standing, actually, why don't you take the oath from the clerk?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter not pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Kohberger, just to make it easier, you don't need to stand when you speak to me. I appreciate the sign of respect, but for convenience, you can remain seated, all right? Before I start asking you questions today, have you consumed substantive questions? Let me ask you, have you consumed any alcohol, drug, or other intoxicating substance that would impair your ability to understand or exercise reasonable judgment?
No.
You feel like you are thinking clearly today?
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. They include on count one, the burglary, a fine of up to $50,000 and a period of incarceration of up to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime. Count 2, 3, 4, and 5 for first-degree murder. The consequences include a fine of up to $50,000, a period of incarceration of life imprisonment, which is a requirement of a sentence, that it be a life sentence with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years on each of those counts. In addition, you would be potentially responsible for a fine of up to $5,000 to each of the victims of your crime, to be enforced in the form of a civil judgment, to operate as additional punishment. This is in excess of any restitution or fines that the court could order. And again, you may be required to pay restitution to the victims of the crime. You would be required to provide, as to counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression, and potentially pay for analysis of those samples. You would lose any right to possess, purchase, or carry a firearm, the right to serve on jury duty, the right to hold public office, and the right to vote. Do you understand the charges and all those possible consequences?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that you've been charged with, that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As you indicate,
Does not specify
I'm not
that.
bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
It's important, isn't it, to be very
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No,
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
no,
Is anyone other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
no,
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
no,
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
no,
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
yes,
And counsel, obviously there have been a number of motions filed to suppress evidence in this case. Other than those filed, are there any other motions that you felt were available with respect to Rule 12?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
yes,
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
yes,
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
yes,
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
yes,
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
yes,
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
yes,
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
yes,
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
yes,
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
yes,
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
yes,
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
yes,
Are those answers truthful?
yes,
Did you sign the document?
yes,
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
yes,
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
yes,
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
yes,
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
yes,
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
yes,
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
yes,
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
yes,
All right, I want you to understand what the state would have had to have proven at trial had you, to the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, had you, if you didn't plead guilty. Let me find the document. Hang on a second here. All right. So as to count one burglary, the state would have to have proven that on or about November 13, 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence located at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. As to count 2, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogen, from which she died. As to count 3, the state would have had to have proven that on that same date in Latah County, at that same address, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. As to count 4, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count 5, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was the traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include a trial, video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway, just across the state line from Moscow. It would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Kernodle was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the third floor. It was on the second floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th, 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court and the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, in those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence of 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly, based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. Court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon that the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor, the state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than one full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. We have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in one day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties or the next week, the week of August 4 is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. Right. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. We'll start at 9 in the morning. Does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing. So we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
We'd have no objection for the order to remain in place through sentencing.
All right. I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn in order to give the parties the space and time to prepare to meet what I'm sure will be the deluge of media requests. That's at least my preliminary decision at this point. We can always revisit if it seems to be, for some reason, I should. That said, obviously, I don't think the defendant, a bond was ever set for the defendant. Were it would be revoked. The prior order allowing him to come in civilian clothes is revoked, given his plea and no longer the presumption of innocence. And in fact, now the actual conviction for the crimes. He will continue to be held at the jail pending sentencing. Is there anything else to say?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
I assume that the trial date will be vacated and those 4 jurors will be released.
The trial will be vacated, and I'm sure that the jury commissioner will get word to those that receive their summons that they won't be required to attend. So
Thank you.
that said, again, if you would all please wait for the parties and the victims' families and others to leave the courtroom before you do, I would appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned. All right, please.
Well, that's a lot. I think we heard maybe more than we thought we might in some cases, and certainly less than we wanted to hear in others. Are you muted there, Miss? Miss, are you muted?
Yes, I was.
There we
muted.
go.
There we go.
Yeah. So one of the things I would mention before I forget, because there was kind of a throwaway order they talked about prior to the sentencing coming up on the 23rd at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Apparently, the documents are all sealed, basically, and they call it a non-dissemination order. So the non-dissemination order will stay in place up until at least the time of sentencing. So
right, because I was initially talking to our producer about getting a FOIA out for the car, almost getting into an accident, trying to get away from the scene, because I would like to see that. But that's going to be
that
there's
video.
No point
Yeah,
in doing that. No point in doing
yeah.
that until after the 23rd. We did learn a lot more. I will tell you that the one day, of course, in the whole month of July, I picked to get my nails done was July 23rd. So,
Well,
I mean, bingo. I should go out and
obviously,
buy a
you
lottery
should have
ticket.
made the court available that information so they
I
could
have
have factored that.
I have to put a little light in this because this is so serious. And the prosecutor was crying. I mean, at the very end when he did, we did learn a couple of things. I mean, I have really one question and one comment. My question is, I was a prosecutor once. As part of this plea deal, I would have made him tell me what he did with the knife. Now, it's intimated that he threw it in those bodies of water where he went, okay? I would have made him tell me that. The second thing I would have made him tell me is why. Why? And the third thing that we learned, which was interesting, is the genealogical DNA was from a Q-tip. Q-tip. We were all wondering how that, what it was, a Q-tip.
Yeah, and that familial DNA has broken open so many cases. This one certainly front and center. So you could ask for those things. I want to make sure people understand there may have been those same requests in this case that the defense they fought the prosecution and said we're not good with that. We don't know what those back and forth negotiations were. So the things that you would have wanted, they may have asked for. And it's not required by statute, clearly. I actually thought when they did when the prosecution read its statement of the case, for lack of a better description.
Right. I mean, that's
we
the
heard
factual.
a lot.
We heard a lot. That's the factual basis. And I said this last night when I was on Cheryl McCollum's Zone 7. I said the prosecutor in this case is going to give the factual basis, and he's just going to agree. All right. And that's exactly what happened. The other thing, though, that Michael, that just really made me almost cry. It's very clear that Xana Kernodle and Ethan were collateral damage.
Yes.
And that's what, so he intended to kill the two women, or at least one woman who was up on that third floor. And then as he came down, because Xana had ordered the DoorDash, she was out, he killed her. And then Ethan was sleeping when he was slaughtered.
In the nearby bedroom.
In the nearby bedroom. I think we learned an awful lot of things, but we still didn't learn why, who was targeted, right, and where the knife is.
And I've seen people suggest in the chat that, well, maybe in victim impact. I don't think there's the opportunity for any of that new information to come out during victim impact. If somebody else discovers it in the investigation that takes place from now till then, maybe it'll trickle out some theories, some speculation. But victim impact statements are highly unlikely to give us any sort of answer to that question about why he did it in the first place. As far as I know, there's never been a connection, more than a drive-by connection between Bryan Kohberger and either of the first two victims. It is, as you say, very clear that the third and fourth folks, bad place, bad time. As to the first reason why he went in the place in the first place, I don't know that that's coming out.
No, I mean, and then the prosecutor didn't mention. Now, maybe you don't mention it because it's something that you don't want to mention because it's so disgusting or whatever. Maybe they've, as we know, 2 families are in support of this plea, and 2 families are not in support of this plea. Okay, so we know the family of Madison Mogen is in support of it, and I believe the family of Ethan Chapin is in support of it. The family of Kaylee Goncalves is not in support, and the family of Xana Kernodle is not in support. That's what I read on the internet, and if that's true.
I think that's consistent with what I've heard. And it does bring me back to one of the first things the court said, which was very interesting about the rash of shit that the court has been getting, specifically from one of the parents. And I'm assuming that's David Goncalves, right? That he's the one that's been most vocal about this being a raw deal, that he is totally against it. And the court basically warning that don't do that. And we're referring people to law enforcement if necessary. So the court took a very strong stand on those who feel it's important to complain to the court. And in fact, the judge said, "You got a problem? Take it up with the prosecution."
Right, and I have to tell you that we had this discussion last night on with Cheryl.
I'm sorry, Steve. It's not Dave. I gave the wrong name.
Steve, yes, Steve.
Yes.
If you're a parent, like if I'm a parent, I really don't want all of the stuff about how my child died and the injuries and all that was going to be in show. I don't want the slaughter to be TV
Public
material.
spectacle, of course, and it will be. We know it will be, and it won't be in the context of a trial. Now it's going to be in the context of whoever fires off the first docuseries.
Yeah, but it just but you're not seeing it in the course of the trial where it's everything is in public information. You're not seeing that. Look, if he got the death penalty, there'll be appeals for years, which I believe he would have gotten the death penalty if someone like me would have voted for it. And I'm against the death penalty for the most part, except for in really severe cases. But this is a really severe case. It would have been years and challenges. And most people who get death penalty are die of old age, right? Because of the appeals and all. So, I mean, this does set some kind of finality, but it's never going to be final for the parents. It's never going to be final for the family. Never.
There will ever be justice. Ever. No.
Ever.
There were some questions about, there's a burglary charge he was convicted of, and people, what did he steal? Well, just to go back to law school for a second here, and we open up the Justice Serve TV classroom. Burglary is purely the intent to enter the dwelling house of another with the intent to commit a felony therein. Well, the felony in this case was the murder. So burglary gets a little confused sometimes as to think you have to rip somebody off of something. You don't. You just have to go in with an intent to commit a felony, which he obviously did. And that's, of course, a nothing charge. That's a throwaway. Even 4 times 10 is a throwaway. So let's talk about the sentencing. This judge, he doesn't have anything to do. There is no
10,000
discretion.
juries. 10,000. I have never, in all the cases, and this may be the case that deserved it, 10,000 people were going to be called in for jury service because they know.
This could have been a 1-year jury selection process.
Yeah, well, I actually, could you be fair in this case? I think 9,000 of them would have raised their hand and said no, maybe 9,500, 600, 700. I mean, you could have had that right off the bat, but they could not be fair in this case from the coverage. I mean, there's no place to put this case. Right?
Well, yeah, that's why they moved it out of Moscow, which is a dot of a town. They have one clerk.
Right.
They, you'd have to take up most of the population just to create a pool. So that it was easy for them to get rid of this case. I know there was some concern at that time that all the folks who live and are most affected by that in Moscow want it tried there. But it wasn't practically a good idea. Even Ada County, as we just learned, it's a strain on Ada County.
Yeah.
And so no matter what anybody...
Moscow, Idaho,
not a chance in hell. But as upset as people might be, you cannot discount that there is a collective sigh of relief in Ada County not having to put up with this. And I'm sorry, that's just a practical consideration. It has nothing to do with the merits of the case or the impact on the families. It's just pencil to paper.
Remember the Chapin family had 2 other kids going to the same school still after this. Now, I don't know if they graduated now, and I'm sure they want them. They've started a fund in Ethan's name to try to do good. Kay Schmidt, the Senator of the Nation, is the accused required to attend sentencing and victim impact? He will be. He will be required. Some places you have to opt out, but they're not going to let him opt out. The judge is going to order him.
I have a feeling that might have been part of the discussions because waiving that attendance it's always in the mix. But I think they may have held fast on that.
Right. I think that he's going to sit there and he's going to have to listen. There's no way a judge is going to let him waive it. No way. as a
Remember,
procedure.
he's not yet a convicted murderer. He's pled guilty, and we got to hear him say guilty 5 times.
Well, the
But
judge
until-
said he was convicted, but until the
He's not.
sentencing.
He's not convicted until sentencing. So if he were to die in prison or jail awaiting sentencing, not unlike Mr. Durst, remember the Durst case out of California? Conviction disappears if you die before sentencing.
Yeah, the only time they change that is in my case in Boston with Aaron Hernandez,
Which is a
because
suicide?
he died and he had a gun charge, right? And he had an appeal from the prior murder charge, and that's been the law across the nation. If you die, you're not convicted. But Massachusetts actually changed the law in response and made it right. It's shocking.
Shocking. Massachusetts has their own way about that.
Yeah, what do you know about that, Joey Kane? Give the one Justice for TV member.
Thanks, Joey Kane.
Now, we have talked about not doing a show tonight because we want to go through all this, and all of you, we have 1,500 here, and we should answer questions, and we should go through that factual basis. But we are just a little secret trying to get a special guest on.
Yeah, let me see if I've gotten any response.
Let's see, because there was a lot here from the prosecutor about the phones and the following his phones and where his phones went. And we do know from our prior guests, and those of us who watch this, Mike Easter helped out. He was in some kind of support after he left about the phones for the FBI, after he left in support service about reading where the phones went and how they went and what towers. And you heard the prosecutor say something about, well, a lot of people pass this tower. It's a main tower, so that's not good enough. But we do have him here, and we do have him here, and we do have him here, and we do have him here. So obviously the analysis of where Bryan Kohberger's phone went was important. And Michael, it's amazing to me that in this day and age, that if you're going to commit a homicide, right? If you're going to commit, and it is called homicide, believe it or not, in Idaho, not murder. It's homicide. Takes the medical examiner's view, which is interesting. That you don't just turn off your phone. Period. You don't have your phone. You leave it on at your house. I don't quite understand that. Joey Kane gifted another Justice Serve TV membership.
I do appreciate that the prosecution acknowledged one of the beefs I've had, because we constantly assume your phone is where you are, right? Because we're never without them. But the fact is that's not necessarily true. So the prosecution admitted we can't say that phone was with the defendant. We can say it was the defendant's phone. So maybe a distinction without a difference in this case, because he's admitted guilt, but worth mentioning, and I appreciate that they did.
And that picture that apparently there was such traumatic view in the court about the leaking to one of the networks, that picture with him with the thumbs up after the shower. We just heard the prosecutor say that we had that picture, that was a real picture. So, that's just an insight into how twisted this beep was and is, to do that, within hours of having committed the crimes that he now admits he committed. It's just sick. Yeah, I'm going to put in our chat, there was one article that gives you some of his writings. Now, not all the ones. Cheryl McCollum had one that he wrote last night that she ended her show with, and they're pretty sick and traumatic, but they're also from a long way back. You're talking, 10 years prior to this horrendous crime, and these twisted writings. So you wonder how long he's been planning and why. I still have the question, why? Now, from the very beginning, just so everyone understands, the defense attorney's role in this is to save Bryan Kohberger's life. That's how you start the case. You start the case looking for mitigation. You start the case looking for what it was in his life that was traumatic. And maybe there's some things that Mr. Kohberger didn't want to come out, assuming that he was going to be convicted, that wouldn't stand him well, maybe if he were in prison. Maybe there's some things he didn't want to come out for his family. For some reason, you see that he seemed to have a pretty good relationship with his family, right? His father came out to get him. He called his mother. But his sisters, there was a report, one of the sisters who was a psychotherapist thought that perhaps when these killings were made, that he was the killer. That's what I read. I can't confirm that. I'm just telling you what I read. Wendy Wright became a new YouTube member. Thank you, Wendy. Really.
Hey, Wendy Wright, is this? Let me ask Wendy a
supporter.
question. Wendy's our graphic artist, right?
Right.
Do I have the right Wendy? Okay,
Right.
because we have some of her work that is very interesting. We hope to share at some point. But
Yeah,
welcome
yeah,
aboard, Wendy.
Welcome aboard. She's fabulous, and she's a big supporter, and she follows me on Instagram, which I usually use for my personal page, but it's been becoming more
Co-opted.
It's been co-opted by Justice Served TV a lot recently, and all. But wow, I mean, I thought that proceeding was very interesting in how it went, with the judge coming out. Judge Hitler had total control of his courtroom, boy, Michael, right?
Yeah. Like I said, he set the tone right off when he's calling out family members and others that have been, ragging on the court for a plea deal that had yet to be, but is now has been accepted. So
Right. Nurse Deb, by the way, is happy that you're coming back to Norfolk County to support
Nurse
Turtle.
Deb.
We have a lot going on here, Michael.
Hey, let me ask this question before we get off this topic real quick, just because I sent a note to Aiden to confirm location and time of his hearing. He's got one or two things going on, and in case I don't hear back from him, anybody else has that information who has accessed the docket from the court and can give me legitimate info, be great. I'm just being lazy. I'll have to look it up if I don't get it from some other source. But anyway, yeah, that's Monday, and I believe it's the main courthouse. I just don't know for sure and the time. Okay, carry on.
No, okay, so I mean, we should dissect this and find out what all of our viewers are thinking. But Michael, what stood out from you from the not just him, because let's talk about Kohberger separately, how he looked, how he stood, but from this, I mean, I started talking about the prosecutor, the DA's, the defense attorney is to save his life, which she did, and her optics, in my view, from the beginning weren't very good. She wouldn't sit next to him, she wouldn't touch him, even today, you see, but she had to have a relationship. Yeah, but she had to have that relationship to get him to plead. So obviously she developed that relationship with him. And it very well may have been a security thing that she had to stay here and there. And someone commented he was not in handcuffs. Well, in a public proceeding, your defendant generally doesn't come in handcuffs in this kind of proceeding. He may come in handcuffs in the sentencing proceeding.
Well, yeah, you heard the court say, "Sorry, no more civilian clothes, no more, no more accommodations."
But he was. I'll guarantee you, he was in a stun vest today, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm sure, or stun cuffs or something, something that would control him if needed. It's funny. I mean, Lori Vallow had the same situation. I saw some speculation Sarah Boone did as well. I'm not so sure she did, to be honest. When I was down there, it wasn't noticeable. But you got to look at the different defendants. Look, a Kohberger looks like a violent, insane person. Not insane criminally, but just something's wrong with those dead eyes and what he's now admitted to doing. Sarah Boone, weird, wacky, not quite the public threat you would suggest that Kohberger could be. I'm just drawing that distinction because the control issues are different for those two different type of defendants. So.
Turtle Boy, by the way, is our viewers came right through.
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Great. That is so nice. Not only do I appreciate that info, but I appreciate it in terms of my travel schedule, because at 2 p.m., it's a lot easier to cruise into on a 3-hour drive. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So remember, you have a 3-hour drive. We have a show and 3-hour drive back. Probably
Yes.
That's what it's going to be looking like Monday night. The show will be, and then you start back, and just so everyone knows, Michael Bryan has had a dead battery, he's had a dead alternator, he's been stuck up there a lot more than just.
I don't really think I was stuck. I was, enjoying some of the local flavor of.
We'd already done our shows, and then you had to leave to go home, and then you couldn't get home.
Yeah, that was. I'm glad it was at the end of the day.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because everything was done. But I got to meet a very nice tow truck guy and, nice repair place. So,
Yeah, people were great. People love you, and locals love you, and you love the locals.
I've said before, it's a real slice of life, that little community that's really been kind of tainted by not so much the Karen Reed case, but all of those corruption issues that we hear so much about.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, tomorrow night we're going to run a show on the select board meeting that occurred last week. Oh, that's going to be, if you haven't watched that meeting, it's going to be an eye-opener. We'll be commenting on that tomorrow night.
It's sad, that hearing was after the verdict. So, people are thinking the verdict is, lead to a collective sigh of relief. And if it was short-lived. Because there are people that are still being harassed by local authorities for being on the wrong side. So it's fascinating. We get into that tomorrow night.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just, you know, I think I'm sorry. I'm looking at him, and when he was first arrested, and I have to tell you, my husband Michael Baden was out with Fox News, and some of the people out there, Paul Morrow and psychologists and all, spent a couple of days out there, and I think it was around the time of the arrest, and when they showed his face and all, to me, it was so scary. I mean, I kept seeing that face in windows, and if I were alone at night, I'd see that face coming up the stairway. The eyes are so dead.
Dead,
It's
snake eyes. Just, you know what it reminded me of? I was in a room with Warren Jeffs in the judge's chambers down in St. George, Idaho, and he was being tried. If people don't remember Warren Jeffs, he was ultimately tried and convicted for accomplice to rape. He was part of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, kind of that weird offshoot of the LDS religion. And they tried this new theory because he was instructing these minors to have sex with adult men, never touched them himself. So the claim was assistance to rape. He was convicted. We as the press got to go in one at a time with the judge in the chambers with Warren Jeffs and listen in and suggest questions of the judge to question Warren Jeffs, and those eyes were the same eyes. They're just like totally dilated snake eyes, no pupil, just zombie dead eyes. And I saw the same thing in Kohberger's eyes.
And unlike you know, who's our mass murderer out of Florida who got the death penalty, the preppy guy who committed all the crimes.
You have to narrow that down in Florida.
Not in Florida, but he was all over the world. Jumped out of the prison. Come on, everybody, you know who I'm talking about. Oh my goodness gracious, how easily Bryan Kohberger has taken over my mind in the picture. All right, well, come to me. It's scary, and I can't imagine. And Miss Nomer, I'm sorry for the loss of your child to cancer. I mean, I can tell you that's not a pleasant thing. It is rough. But the parents who are sitting there and thinking, this is the last thing that my child saw. I don't know how they're ever going to sleep at night. Now, I love the Chapin family. Ted Bundy, thank you very much. How could I forget Ted Bundy, right?
Yeah, he did have that.
But he didn't have those. He was charming. That's what got
very
him,
charming, right? And very smart.
Very smart, but kind of like the same kind of lanky, tall, thin look. But this one, wow, you know, this is just, you know, if you walked into a bar and he was looking at you, you'd want to walk out with security.
Yeah,
whether you were male or female.
It's just you know, it's the unliving kind of look. It's and I don't know how that works. You know, I'm no doctor, but how does that you know, mental issue manifest itself in such an obvious physical characteristic? Right. I don't know.
I don't know. And the writings from 2011, his writings are they're so empty, and you have to wonder. You know, the family's been awfully quiet, but you have to wonder what they saw, what people saw all around. And that's the interesting thing about what defense attorneys do in mitigation. They know everything about him. They start from in utero when you do a mitigation case, just so you know. You don't start with the guilt or innocence. You put that aside. That you're not concerned about that. You start with mitigation to try to save the client's life. And there's things that we obviously don't know that both the defense knows and obviously the prosecutor knows that happened or went on in his life. That's not to justify anything that he did. But I made a point last night that if we are going to get a handle on not having the Ted Bundys and not having the Bryan Kohbergers and not having people who slaughter people, we have to find out what goes wrong, either genetically or in utero in a childhood, to be able to identify help before something like this happens, because this is just wild. I mean, he did his whole graduate work in dealing with how you process crime scenes, Michael.
Yeah. Yep. There's a lot to to take in, and frustrating on some levels, but actually, as I said, I think we learned a lot more than maybe we expected. And so now when they finally end the dissemination order or non-dissemination order, we may learn, just a little bit more. For our special guest tonight, I'm still working with, had some follow-up questions, which may or may not impact whether the special guest can make an appearance.
So we'll keep talking until he tells us, right? All right, keep talking until he tells us, so we can let everyone know. I do have a rant coming out at 4:00. Now, you said I put it in as a draft.
Yeah, I'll check that while we're on the air here.
I hope it's not a draft, because I do have a thing that says I'm going to send it to you, Michael Bryant. It says video scheduled. Your video will be set public on July 2nd at 4 p.m.
Yeah, it looks like it's changed from draft to scheduled. And by the way, speaking of scheduled, we were on last night with Olivia. We did kind of the Karen Reed moments. Those are being trickled out in bites. Sometimes I know people can't devote the time to watch an entire stream. I get that. So we like to carve it up into little more manageable bites. So I think we've had 3 come out. I think we got 3 more coming out, including at 4:00. Yours and another bite will be at 4:00.
Well, then maybe I should schedule my rant for 4:10 or 3:50.
Don't make people wait. No, don't make people wait.
And let me tell you, this is personal, and it involves the Sandra Birchmore case in a way. It involves somebody who emailed my office and gave his full email, but he didn't disclose like his conflicts. He ragged at me for having a conflict talking about the Sandra Birchmore case because my husband was hired by the civil attorneys. And believe me, and then he ragged on my husband and me for something that, and you'll hear his words, okay? And the moral of the story is, don't ever come after my family with your words, because I will come after you with the words that hopefully will put you in your place. All right. Don't question my ethics. Don't question my family. And we're going to go through it. And by the way, I've put out his Gmail in there. He wants to come at me and he wants to give me his Gmail and he wants to say everything except for the fact that what his relationship is and why he's so protective of, I believe, Matthew Farwell. Come on. All right. So it's going to be a rant for all ages. If you think the one against Jennifer Coffindaffer was a rant.
Against who? You say something that reminds me of the line from a movie. Don't ever go against the family. That's what it sounds like.
I am
Italian. Don't ever go against the family.
I am 100% Calabrian. I am Italian. Okay, just so you all understand that. Don't ever attack my family. All right. If you want to attack them elsewhere, but don't you write me to attack my family. You write me to attack I have a right to say whatever I want about the Sandra Birchmore case. And we're going to continue to talk about it. We're not going to be scared. We're not going to be shied away. We're not going to be intimidated in any way. Okay.
And now, just because I think the First Amendment deserves a little something here, somebody can say whatever they want, but
sure.
they get what's coming. So knock yourself out. Freedom of speech, I'm all for it. Don't have to agree with it. Say
whatever you want. If you feel the need to say it, say it. But then there's consequences for your words. All right. And the consequences are my words. Okay. So Donnie Not Wahlberg received my yoga pants, by the way. I love them. Yeah, I know. I'm wearing today I'm actually wearing the wider pants with my dress. I have to stand up to show you this because these are great. All right. These are just great. Okay, and I have a red top, but here you go, Justice Serve TV. See them right there. Okay.
And obviously, I have I only have a few pieces of merch because every time I go in there, it says every time I go to look, it says Linda Kenney Baden bought the last one.
And you have to carry. I'm looking for. I'm waiting for 2 more pairs of yoga pants, and I also bought another hoodie. I bought the hoodie with the camo because I am up here in the country, up here in with the bears and the snakes and all. So I did buy a camo hoodie so that I would.
You blend in. I don't see that happening. I don't see any blending in going on there.
Yeah, I was a little nasty today, though, to the stand. You'll see that I did tell him he couldn't afford anything that I was wearing. But
oh my
gosh. Not that I was
going classist on us. Hold on.
Yeah, I said no, not that it matters what you can afford. but don't go at me for what I'm buying because you think that's what that's how our opinion is made, you know. And also, Michael, hey, in case anyone hasn't noticed, I don't think anyone can tell me what to do. All right, including my husband.
Yeah, I mean, no, you can try. You could try to tell you what to do, but is it going to be well received? Probably not.
Noodles' mama says something interesting. He wanted to be Bryan Kohberger. Going back to Brian, wanted to be Ted Bundy. Boy, that'd be interesting if he has written about that in some of his writings and is saying about that he wanted to be Ted Bundy in some way. Wouldn't that be fascinating? Wow.
Of course, as we know, the Son of Sam rule will prevent any sort of profit-making scheme if he wants to sell his story. He can tell it, he just can't sell it.
Right. Can't tell, but you just can't sell it. Absolutely right. Although I've heard that there's ways around how people get the rights to
Of course, a
stories.
trust, family members, however.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And all. But I want to know those things. I want to know why. I want to know who of the girls, the women, were they both his target?
Who were the really targeted? Yeah.
Who was the really target? Why? And I want to know where the knife was. And quite frankly, it's kind of an idiotic kind of thing to do. He was going to go try buying another knife and deleting his purchase history. That's not a mastermind.
No. I mean, yeah, when people say he seemed to be intelligent, that doesn't rule out stupidity. He just seemed like, in general, he had a higher IQ.
Oh, wow. My hoodie was delivered at home today. Woo! I can't wait.
How come everybody knows that but you?
I'm going to have to go to the mailbox and see. I'm going to have to take a trip down to the mailbox and see. That'd be great. Terrific. Super. We're like merch advertising. Anyhow, any of you have any other questions about this while we wait to see whether or not we can get our special guests on to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to get an answer anytime soon, but we obviously will update folks as soon as we learn, because I don't know that we're going to do anything if we don't get this special guest on. Is that right? Yeah. I'm trying to find out what's going on in Diddy, because they are an hour and a half into the follow-up, which was supposed to determine very simply whether or not Mr. Sean Combs gets out of jail today.
I have to remind her, the funny thing is Michael and I were going to pre-tape something for today and kind of take the day off, right? And instead we've done like one show, one taping, and we may be doing another show. Let's see, hold on a second. See if I can
checking sources.
Yeah, I'm checking sources too. Yeah, I'm checking sources. And we may want to, just schedule a short show now so that whether it's a half an hour or not, to do updates on both Diddy and Kohberger. If we get Mike Easter on and just do a.
Oh, you just tipped them off as to who our.
I told them who it's going to be. Not that they couldn't figure out. Let's see.
Yeah, and the concern is, for those who may not have been watching when he's been on, either him or baby him. AI baby him.
Have you all seen our AI babies? Have you seen our AI baby?
I've seen it being reposted here and there. He did some work on this case. And so there's obviously some prohibitions against what he can talk about, when he can talk about it. Remember, no sentencing, no conviction. So, he may feel constrained. So maybe we can talk generally, because it was so important. If you break down the prosecution statement, it's a dot to dot. Here's where he was at this time. Here's where he was at this time. And it's all of the cell tower information. Well, that's Michael Easter's thing.
Right. And as a matter of fact, he went back to the house the next day on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. It's actually the same day for about 10 minutes. My theory is that
he then took that picture.
Right. And then it took the picture after he went back to his apartment. But my theory is that what happened is he was looking for the knife sheath. Maybe where it was, where he parked it. Did he drop it when he got into the car? That's my theory.
I'm thinking, with daylight, maybe I'll find something.
Right. Because he didn't realize it. So, whoever it is, I think some of the families are speaking outside the courthouse, and maybe we can do some of that later and listen to them. And then we'll know what's happened with Diddy by then. So I think, Michael,
let's do that. We'll just come back at 6 and do something, something.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll need a thumbnail. We'll need a notion. But you know how you'll get notified? If you all hit the subscribe right now. We have so many people watching right now. The like the share, and the notify. So I'm going to give you a chance to do that because we have like 1 million viewing hours, people that have come to our show to watch us. And yet although we're grateful for our near 22,000 subscribers, if everyone who came here and saw these guests who come on for free to try to inform you and educate and help us, and we listen to them, and sometimes we get entertained by them, we'd be up there. We'd be the biggest law tuber show that exists on YouTube. And so we're hoping Diddy's is back at 5 p.m. So that's great.
Crazy.
So if we're
Long
back
day.
if we're back at 6 p.m., we should have an answer with that. In the meantime, we do have how many more clips do you have scheduled from Mike Easter with the top from Olivia? I'm sorry, with the top 6 moments.
Yeah, those are with Olivia. There are 6
3 out.
total. I think 4, 6, and 8, because I didn't think we were doing a 6 o'clock show. So they're scheduled for 4, 6, and 8 to get to the top moments. These are the 6 moments that we highlighted with Olivia.
Well, I have a
So,
4 o'clock Rampian
Yeah,
scheduled.
it's just
too.
a lot going on. Yeah, it's just
lot
they're
going on.
they're easy digestible bites. It's no
So-
major commitment.
Yeah, if you go to our Justice Served TV YouTube page, by the way, I just put it right here. If you go to that, right, that's our channel. That's our channel. That's our Justice Served TV channel. It has all the clips and everything on it. But again, you'll get notified if you are become a subscriber. It's for free. Subscribe, please. And also, if you hit like, I've learned that if you hit like, that actually gets you in the algorithm that pushes you out, so people can see the fact you're going to have a show.
Yes, we are slaves to the AI bots, but that's we've made that choice, and we hope you can put up with it because it works when it works.
All right, everybody. Thank
All
you
right,
for
we'll see you later
joining us.
tonight, 6 o'clock.
See you
I'm
later,
Michael
and-
Bryan. Do the right thing. Hey.
I'm Linda Kenney Baden. Keep watching our page. A lot coming out of it today. Hit subscribe, share, like, notify. See you at 6.